Welcome to the Dream Journal from the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz. The Dream Journal is a weekly show where we explore the power of nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with listeners like you.
In the house behind, the life you find is something understood.
In the words of Carl Jung, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens.
Time is keenly found. We are not alone. Water over.
Today's music is called Neuroscapes, created new for you this week by Rick Level. Inner wisdom figures and active imagination versus internal family systems. It's all about inner exploration with today's guest, Charles Tack. I am your host, Catherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. We are also a weekly podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, but most importantly, tell your friends. You're interested in getting folks talking about dreams. You can find archives at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., all those good places, YouTube now, and also at ksqd.org/the-dream-journal. Plus, we are on PRX, Public Radio Exchange, looking for some stations to pick us up as a regular show. Hey, welcome, Charles. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Okay. I'm excited.
Excellent. So after years of facilitating groups and coaching clients to improve, Charles realized he was only superficially successful. More importantly, he did not enjoy what he advocated for. I want to ask you about that one. And this begins a decades-long inquiry that led to an ever-increasing appreciation for our childlike aspects, greater access to holistic wisdom influences, and more embodied joy. So, Charles, let's just jump right in. What were you advocating for that you did not enjoy when you were coaching clients?
Oh, good question. Fundamentally, working from the outside in, teaching people how to be in a certain way that may not go, that may not fit their own inner wisdom.
Okay. Are you talking about things like cognitive behavioral therapy where you train yourself to think in certain ways? Or okay.
And team building. I mean, basically, I was working with high-level executives about how to work in teams. And of course, that's really helpful. But the best part was actually teaching them how to access themselves through breath work. And that was the main gift.
Oh, so tell me more about that. So was breath work part of your transition to more inner work versus from the outside in? Or tell me about that.
No, actually, I had started a lot earlier, but I didn't link the inner and the outer when I worked in the corporate world. The focus was on, again, performance. But what we ended up teaching was how to actually become more aware of yourself through your breath. So we taught some really, really basic breath work so that the executives could actually do that before they had their meetings. And that actually was quite helpful. But in the longer term, there was way more to go in terms of how do you learn to be a leader from the inside out, which is why internal family systems, which is self-led, is an interesting format.
Yeah, why don't you say a little bit more about IFS? Internal family systems is something that has a huge following, and many people find it extremely valuable. And I wonder if you say a little bit about what that is and how, if you use that, or how it differs from what you do.
Yeah. I actually use it in concert with the inner wisdom work.
Okay.
Internal family systems is more of a therapeutic model to look at our parts, how we actually have these different voices inside of ourselves that influence our behavior and mostly manage how we are to be appropriately in circumstances. And the more we get to know those inner voices, the more we become aware of them and see what runs us. But then beneath what runs us are those things that we don't really want to acknowledge. So IFS is a therapeutic oriented focus on healing the past so that we can be present here and now.
Can you give maybe some examples of IFS? Like you talk about these inner voices, and how do they control us? Where do they come from? I mean, we've never really done a full show on IFS, which is not what this is. But I do want to get into a little bit about your view of IFS and how you use it, and because it's not necessarily associated with dreams, and so I'm also curious about bridging that, how you use that along with this other kind of approach.
Okay. Well, the link to dreams is that dreams access our inner worlds, and internal family systems IFS actually also does the same thing. Many of us are so focused on what's happening externally that we don't have awareness of what's inside. So for instance, if someone, being single, someone meets somebody else, they put on a facade to flirt with that other person. And the other person will put on the same kind of facade, and they're actually operating from parts with each other. And of course, that's, it's a game that people play, all the time. But what happens when you drop beneath that persona or those parts to share what's authentically real?
Right.
Yeah.
So these parts are inside of us, and yet they're not necessarily real. So just because it's inside doesn't mean it's real. Is that what you're saying? Like, so I'm certainly familiar with the voice that says, "Oh, you really ought to do that," and it's an inner voice, but there's some level where it's not authentic. Is that what? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, the inner voices are often based on what we grew up with.
Yes.
My mother's voice and my father's voice are still in my head, and they'll tell me what to do.
Right.
And I can tell by the tone. You know this, right? Yeah. So, and then also where you grew up, the culture you grew up in. I grew up in a small town in rural Pennsylvania, and so there's a voice or voices of people who say, well, you don't do that, or you do that, or this kind of thing. So when we listen to those voices, we engage the world in a partial way. It's not our wholeness.
Okay, and so identifying those voices is important to, like, there's certain clues I get, like if I hear should or ought to or always or never, like these are kind of key kind of like clues that this voice is not authentic. It's not a deeper part of who I am, because it can be really hard to distinguish those different voices.
Yeah. Right.
So in IFS, that these voices actually have certain personalities, right? They actually get assigned kind of names, right? The kind of roles, at least, I guess.
That depends on who you work with. Some people have names. I enjoy giving my parts names, but other people just talk about the part. But yeah, back to your question. I mean, who's the real Catherine Bell?
Right.
Like on this conversation with me. So this is like, and who's the real Charles Tack having this conversation with you?
Right.
And I don't know about you, but when you have a real conversation that feels authentic and juicy, even if it's difficult, it's way more interesting than if you're playing a game. So this is part of my own draw to how can we actually have genuine interactions with one another. And obviously we have to start with ourselves and try to find that in ourselves.
Right, right. Now, there's something that you've drawn a distinction in some of our conversation beforehand about the difference between exploring inwardly versus doing inner work to improve ourselves. And I'm curious about that because I want to be a better person, but what does that mean, better?
Right.
And sometimes the dreams just seem to be like exploring, like this is kind of how it is. It doesn't say whether it's good or bad, but then I get to say, how does it feel? Like, does that feel good or bad?
Yeah. Good questions, because these are really important kinds of distinctions, and that's part of where the accessing an inner wisdom guide or character.
Oh yeah, let's get into the inner wisdom voices. Yes.
Yeah, because so what I've discovered over the years is that the universe is really generous. It just gives us what we ask for. And one of the ways that it does and has done with me and with clients is that you can find an inner wisdom guide who is a step or two ahead of you in terms of development and can help you develop qualities that you're looking for. For instance, authenticity, we've been talking about. How do I become more of an authentic person? And the access to those inner wisdom characters through conversation, through dialogue, and for me, I do it in journal writing, but you can do it in a number of different ways through art and other things too. But that conversation, that dialogue actually enhances your own movement towards being, in this case, more authentic. To the point where what I've discovered is that you actually learn to become that inner character and embody it.
Oh.
And once you've embodied that character, you are that naturally. So there's a development process of learning a lot of things and practicing and being an experience. But then there's this place where you actually make it to like, oh, I'm being this character.
I wonder if you have an example, Charles, that you could share with us, either from your own work or from clients of meeting an inner wisdom figure and then learning to embody that.
Okay. So when I was single, I was going through this dating process many years ago, and I got caught in this old pattern over and over again of what I used to do in high school. And so I did the same kind of thing with it, and I realized it's happening over and over and over again. Well, I met an inner female character who actually guided my dating life, basically by we would have conversations before and after dating, and then the learning would happen, and then the next date would be another opportunity to practice some of the things that we had talked about.
You're talking about in dreams that you had talked about with this?
Yeah, well, this is like a inner
active imagination.
Yeah, Jung would call it active imagination. It's kind of amplifying dreams. It's kind of working with daydream characters. But this character came on actually summer solstice. I looked it up before today. So
okay.
Yeah, it happened at summer solstice, and I gave her the name Summer, and she didn't mind at all and we worked together for like a year and a half. So I have hundreds of pages of conversation with her, and the effect of going out with different people. And then it eventually resolved to the point where I no longer would even be drawn to this certain kind of person that originally attracted me.
So Charles, I'm curious. Like, how do we even know if a dream figure is a wise person, or is there a way that sometimes we could get led down the wrong
Oh
the wrong
man,
path?
that is such an excellent question. I I don't know, to be quite honest, because there are times when you get a character who comes in who seems wise and actually ends up, poking. But here's the thing: when the inner characters are poking, they're actually
I'm sorry, poking.
poking us,
Yeah.
into like, da da da. You're this or you're that.
Oh, okay.
The shoulds are pokes, right? And so
I
that's
see.
pretty clear.
Okay, okay.
But here's the thing: is that the original meaning of the word evil is beyond due measure. The original definition of Satan is a worthy adversary, and the devil is to be diabolical, but they're all in service of our learning. So even when the inner character seems negative, there are ways to learn from them. And underneath it all, it's like and that's why the word poking came. Underneath it all, it's just a poke to say, are you sure you want to do this? That kind of thing.
Okay, so that then is a sign of that's the character to be cautious with. Is that what you're saying? Or is that poking us in the direction of our growth?
Yeah, that's both. I mean, both can happen. And the other piece that I didn't bring in is that actually fits this right now is I've worked with the I Ching for 30 years or so. And oftentimes when I'm confused and have a question like that you just asked, I'll ask the I Ching what its impressions are or perspectives or suggestions are based on that. And often there's a very clear distinction of there's something really important for you to follow, or there's something really important to avoid. So that's more, now that you mention it, now that's more of where I've learned to begin to discern, to the point where I can more readily discern where this voice might be coming from.
Right. But, in my, my relationship to things like the I Ching and the Tarot and is that it's really reflecting ourselves. And so maybe it gives us a way to recognize our own instincts, our own intuitions. Like I'm thinking of like also the dreamer's aha. Like I may have a dream about something and someone, well, there's 5 different things that could mean, but the one that goes, when I have that aha, like that's the one that's relevant to me. And so I think maybe the I Ching and the Tarot, certainly in my understanding of these things, that's how they work. It's like,
exactly.
I've done a little bit of I Ching and they're always very vague, but rich, a lot of rich imagery in the I Ching. And so the thing that grabs me about that is the one that I trust. And so it's basically mirroring back to me, my own intuition. So it becomes like a vehicle, like a mirror. It's hard to comb your own hair without a mirror.
Exactly, and it is vague, and dreams are often vague.
Yes,
and it is the aha that goes, because the aha that says, "Oh, there it is." Because for me, when I first started reading it, I read the Wilhelm version, which was really difficult, and I said if even one sentence made sense to me, that would be enough to help me move. So I would work for that one sentence or move towards what's the aha here. Because it's like the mirror to touch that part in us that sparkles, like, oh yeah, that's it.
Okay. So we come back again to feelings, which is, as a sciencey type like I am, it's sometimes hard to get in touch with those, and dreams really provide me a chance to connect with my feelings. And it sounds like this kind of question I asked about how do you know if it's a helpful character or if it's leading us astray. It's like we got to just keep tuning into the feelings and the ahas. And maybe there's a time when the character is valuable for me to dialogue with, but after a while, like, man, maybe not so much.
Right. And it would begin to fade away as we put more attention on the ahas that are pulling us forward to the qualities we're wanting to embody, like authenticity.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to get a little more of something, some more specific examples in here. Like maybe we could use this as a chance to kind of look into about the younger parts. You mentioned the idea that those voices in our heads often come from our upbringing or the culture we were raised in. And I wonder if you have some other example that you could share with us about that kind of a thing.
Yeah, good. And actually, I was giving a reading to a client, an I Ching reading in particular, and it was actually more of a coaching session along with the reading. His question was, he had a lot of health issues over his life, and he had the chance to work with a healer, a remote healer from, I don't know, Arkansas, somewhere like that. And he asked about whether or not to work with her, and we did the reading, and he got a very, very, very clear no. This is not appropriate, and the I Ching was unequivocal. Sometimes they aren't, but this was unequivocal. And so he not only was he pleased with that, but he wrote me this great accolade, testimonial, and then sometime later I talked with him again, and I said, so did you, what happened? And he goes, he said, I saw her anyway. I paid her a lot of money, and it was horrible.
Oh no.
And he was, and what I didn't realize was that he had the inner guidance, but his inner character, his past life worry and anxiety completely took over, and he forgot to follow the guidance, and he worked with her, which was diabolical. It basically, it didn't work. So this is where I think that working both with inner characters and how they influence us, and the wisdom figures, because we're always negotiating, right? We're always trying to figure out, where do we stand in this, right? You laugh, right? Isn't that true? Right?
Totally.
What do I do here? I don't know. My one voice says this, another voice says that.
Yeah. No, and it's really often, like I've been going through a series of nightmares the last month and a half, really, and it's not, I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know what it is, and they're just I'm waking up anxious, and I feel like there's some really deep negotiation going on, and I'm just trusting that there's something valuable. Like I tend to just immediately erase the nightmares when I wake up, but I write them down, and then I forget about them for the best as I can until I have time to talk to my dream coach, and then he often finds things that are valuable in there, because I wake up with these upsetting images, and I just have to trust that there's some kind of a negotiation going on. There's some growth, some realizations maybe, because it isn't always comfortable, like coming to terms with our own mortality or health of loved ones, and there's a lot that can be just disturbing, and yet I trust that those dreams and those inner wisdom figures, I love that phrase, because they do seem pretty common. And I'm just going to go ahead and share a dream I had this morning, which was not a nightmare. At least the part that I remembered was somebody gave me a ukulele. It was a little one. It was like a little miniature ukulele. And I've been, listeners will know that I've been playing ukulele the last few years, and it's been a really fun way to express myself. But this was a teeny one with a kind of a, and I'm like, okay, I was kind of dubious, but there's something like I could just have this in my pocket. Like I could take it with me. And so that felt like a real gift from the dream. There's some way that that maybe that little ukulele is could be a kind of a little bit of wisdom. I can pull it out of my pocket. Like, right now I'm like, woo, what's next? Okay.
See, and that's where, like, for instance, giving attention to the ukulele.
Yeah.
And just letting it be there, it becomes a part of us that may have wisdom if it's given more attention.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that idea that giving something attention is a way to activate it, right? To give it some energy. And so that's,
Right.
Writing down dreams, sharing dreams with others, and doing dialogue. You've talked about the dialogue. I wonder if you have some advice about dialoguing with these figures.
Yeah. I do.
Okay.
It's coming.
Okay, that's all right.
It's interesting. I mean, you just said a whole lot. The thing about the nightmares for me is I actually will look at the pattern, especially if I write them down. Mm-hmm. There's a pattern here,
right.
And this is what a dream coach can help with. Is there's some pattern here, and there's something I like to. I've asked the universe for simple dreams. When they get really complicated, I say, I can't really understand. Could you make this simpler?
Yeah.
And what's happened is it becomes so obvious for my level. And so, for instance, and then I'll work generally with the one character or the one thing that is most interesting to me, like the ukulele.
Yep.
It's like, what? And so I will go back into the dream or back into my imagination and let the ukulele be there. And I'll say, do you have something to say to me? Or would you like to expand on yourself or an expression of yourself? So the ukulele may change in size, or it may morph into something that looks like it's underwater, or it may become a violin, or I mean, that's the thing for me is when a ukulele would become more of a violin or a cello or something that's deeper and it's got a broader range.
Right.
That'll suggest to me that there's something that this gift is being given the attention it wants so that it can grow in you.
And do you do this on paper or out loud with somebody?
I usually do it on paper. Okay. I mean, you have a dream coach that you could work with, but and I do it with clients too. So I'll take them back into their place, into the dream, and I'll actually. The other question is, I'll say, what else is around that ukulele? What's the environment it's in? Because there's something about the larger environment that it's like, it's not just the ukulele, right? You have the ukulele inside a context.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
So Charles, we're going to take a short break and we'll come right back. And I want to talk a lot more about this active imagination idea because I think this is something we have not talked a lot about on the Dream Journal. So this is Charles Tack, and I'm so glad to have you on the show. And I'll let you know we are broadcast live from the KSQD studios in Santa Cruz and co-broadcast live in San Jose by KCXU. My name is Catherine Bell. You are listening to The Dream Journal. Okay, we are listening to The Dream Journal. My name is Catherine Bell. Our guest is Charles Tack. And I want to just make an announcement about the IASD conference in Rolduc, the Netherlands, happening June 8th through 12th. You can go to asdreams.org for more information. I'll be giving a workshop and dream groups. And I think it's going to be a pretty amazing time over there. Happy anniversary to the Dream Journal. As you may have seen if you're following me on social media, the Dream Journal is going through a rebranding. You can check us out on Instagram and Facebook and follow hashtag The Dream Journal. We are almost to 250 episodes, a 5-year anniversary for the Dream Journal.
Wow.
Yeah. Happy birthday to us. So,
wow, yeah.
So Charles Tack, so glad to have you on the show today.
Mm-hmm.
And, we were talking about active imagination and inner wisdom figures. And I want to get back to active imagination, but let's make a little detour into how you got started. Like you've mentioned being in the corporate world, and what made you start to pay attention to inner voices? And
Actually, that's a good. I was, my inner world and the outer world were very separate. So the corporate world was happening and my professional life was happening. But what had happened actually even 40 years ago, even before I started the corporate work, was I took a course on dialogue journal writing created by Ira Progoff, who's a Jungian analyst. And he taught how to access inner characters, basically, and have dialogues with them. And I never told anybody about it, but I just loved it. I absolutely thrilled at it and have hundreds of pages of journals. And that has developed into what we're talking about today. And then IFS came along, and then I started studying Jungian theory and practices more directly. And, Jung was kind of one of my guides at times, and I would be led. His Memories, Dreams, and Reflections is a great book on how he's worked with stuff. So that's a little short story about how I started.
Okay. Yeah. So it just really spoke to you, and that's an example of really following our own intuition without really knowing,
right?
And having to explain. Like maybe I don't even have to explain why this interests me. This is something that really calls to me, dreams are quite a bit like that. So I want to get back to some more about active imagination and inner dialoguing. And one of the things that you and I have chatted about before are the idea of inner polarities where both are appreciated. So like sometimes I was, and before the break talking about, well, how do I know if it's a good figure or a bad figure? But maybe they're both valuable figures. Maybe I don't have to assign a good or bad picture to these figures that show up, and I wonder what you have to say about that and how to work with these characters.
Exactly. Good. Thank you for that question. The polarities, it isn't good or bad. You're right. It could be one end where we prefer and the other end we don't prefer. And and so actually an example that came as you were talking, because I figured you could ask for an example.
Yes, I love examples.
So I had this guy who was a man, a real physical person who was kind of a friend, but he would always bug me. I did not like him. I just did not like him.
Now, this is a waking life person, right?
Waking life person. And every single time we get together, he would ask these questions that just I didn't like it. It was clearly he had a different agenda than me. And what had happened was that we had polarized, and he was the other pole. He was the guy who had to act in the world all the time, serving and contributing. So he's has this list of accomplishments that he's done, over his long life. And I have been much more of a hermit and, reclusive about my own inner world. And finally, I did an inner dream I did active imagination with this guy. And I finally said, it was literally, he was poking me, I just hated it. And finally I said, all right, I turned to him in the active imagination. It was very clearly an intention to listen. And I said to him, what do you want to tell me? What do you want to tell me? And he was enormously direct. he was enormously direct. His voice he said, you have 10 good years left. What are you going to do with it?
Wow.
I know. Talk about those kinds of questions.
Yeah.
Right? You have 10 good years left. What are you going to do with it? And that became a character in me that actually helped to balance my more reclusive nature with being more external, and being more external, like on this podcast with you, talking about how this inner work works. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's interesting that this was actually a Waking Life person. It was so, and yet there was something about this person in Waking Life that just kept triggering you, and you took the step of seeing this as a dreamlike moment.
Yes.
And that there's something about this character. Now, I imagine if you actually talked to him in Waking Life, this person, he wouldn't know what you're talking about. What do you mean you have 10 good years?
I know.
What does that even mean?
Exactly. It doesn't even matter.
It doesn't matter.
What matters is that they affect us in a certain way. And I'm always looking for in dreams, and is what pulls you, what inspires you, what draws you forward, and what are you repulsed by? And so when I work with clients, it's one or the other. And that's the point, is to work with what's pulling you because it's an inspiration forward, or what's holding you back, what do you dislike, because it's a polarized part that is, you've rejected it. Like I rejected how busy he was. I mean, he's in life, he's enormously busy. He's not self-reflective at all. He just doesn't think like that. He just is a doer. And so, I'm going, this think thoughtful part goes, well, that's not very helpful. But the truth is, it is helpful in a certain way, because it points to what really matters here.
And so you talked earlier about embodying these figures, and was this a bit of a call for you to become a little more extroverted and actually?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely. And that's actually happened. It's happening. Yeah.
Okay. And so like by working with these characters, we can, but of course it's hard to say, like if I'm repulsed by a character, I wouldn't think I'd want to become more like that, but maybe there is something about that is valuable for me.
Exactly. And that's the point with him is I knew he actually had good intentions, even though he was obsessive compulsive, whatever,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I knew the intention behind, there was a positive intention behind it. Like, Charles, you have something to contribute it. Don't waste any moments, because you have, 10 good years, which is metaphoric, of course.
Hopefully. I mean, has it been more than 10 years since this guy? Okay.
Yeah.
But
it's only a couple years ago.
Okay. Well, so you don't know yet. But there's something about there's a spiritual practice of keeping death before you, and like just to recognize that we don't have all the time in the world, and there's a whole spiritual practice of like meditating in graveyards and wearing a skull ring, or to remind yourself of death, and there could be something to bring some urgency. Like, don't hesitate to tell the people you love them, and don't hesitate to do what really needs to be done. And so there could be like that 10-year figure may have just brought in a certain amount of urgency to your evolution.
Yeah. And for me, the feeling is despair. When you feel despair, like death, like there's nothing you can do. To literally let yourself feel it all the way through.
Wow.
I mean, it's way easier said than done.
Yeah.
But to literally let yourself feel that despair. It is like good internal family systems work, IFS work, where you actually work with the hidden character called the exile. And when that is deeply felt in your body, like in your belly and how awful it is, something actually happens. And it's like that. It's like you said, it's like, what?
Yeah.
And so I've had to deal with, you've had nightmares. I've had this thing around despair at some time back, and to literally feel it, how awful it felt, let something else emerge to that I didn't expect, and I don't even know what to call it.
Wow.
But there's more energy that happens when you give yourself to the dark.
You know, Charles, as you're speaking and talking about letting yourself feel despair, another word I sometimes have heard is devastation, and
Yes.
like nobody wants to feel that.
Right.
But when you're talking about that, and I'm thinking about my various nightmares, it's like, and the fact that I pretend I don't have them, like I try not to
Right.
have them. Yet when I do, something's unwinding in my belly as you're talking about this, like maybe it's okay to feel that.
Yeah.
And if I don't want to feel it, and yet there's something valuable there. That really touches something in me, Charles.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the word unwinding, it really is an unwinding. It is an unraveling. It's in IFS they call it unburdening. But it's this thing that literally just gently comes apart. It just gives it has space to express itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That really touches something in me.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So where have you been headed now? Like, what kinds of things are opening up for you? You're obviously a man on a journey, and we've talked a little bit about coming out in a way, like being on the podcast and being a little more extrovert, a little more active in the world, and. You know, what else? What do you have, or maybe what examples of that do you have of what's unwinding for you now? Just to get really personal, maybe I'm poking you a little bit here. Just to get really personal, like, what is up for you these days?
Yeah, thank you for the poke. It's I'm writing a book on I Ching experiences, working with the I Ching. It's as if it's as if the I Ching is a grandfather figure, and I, the asker of for wisdom, is a grandson. Learning from that, and so I'm writing stories that are actually, some of them are literally grandfather-grandson stories, but that are related to actual experiences of using the reading to convey wisdom and what happened afterwards. Like for me, I have a science background too, so you want proof, and so. It's not just accepting, oh, of course, that's not true. It's like, no, I got the reading. I'm going to go through the experience that I asked for the reading for, and I'm going to look back on what the reading said and the experience and see if there's more learning that can come from that reflection. So there's a lot of writing about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this brings up for me something that we mentioned earlier on in the show. But what about joy? And what about being more childlike? Like, what about where does? I don't even know what I want to say about that. But what do you want to say about that? What is joy? And like this whole thing started with you saying you weren't enjoying the things that you were teaching people. Like, so what do you enjoy? And what is it about to look for joy?
Thank you. Good question. And the truth is that my personality is pretty joyful, and that's a natural thing. But I get stuck in trying to do it a certain way. So I took a martial arts class, which was really great. But sometimes the teachers were so serious that there was no place for joy. I was visiting someplace, and I smiled in class at one point, and the teacher said, "There's no smiling in class."
Oh, wow!
And I honored that. I didn't smile the rest of the class, but I never went back again. I was just traveling through town.
That would be a big red flag for me. Like, no, thank you.
But here's the thing on that is that there are different ways that people express themselves that are helpful in the world. This guy who taught this way actually was benefiting. He had a large class. He was benefiting a certain aspects of the students, and probably maybe having downsides there too. But my way is more joyful. And there's a lot of spiritual teachers in the world who are pretty serious. And then there's also ones that are pretty joyful, like the Dalai Lama. And, there's like, what is going on there? So what are they doing? They're embodying themselves. They're embodying their radiance. And so can I actually embody my radiance?
Ooh.
And if I'm not embodying it, what's going on here? So I don't know if is that answering your question?
No, can
joy?
I embody my radiance? And am I embodying my radiance?
Right. And it's a contrast to people who put on the facade of being fun, right? Or I know this guy who actually loved going to comedy shows, and he took me to a bunch of them. And he said, why don't you go to comedy shows? I said, well, what I realized was the difference between the two of us was he was not a happy person. And he needed the comedy to find joy, and great. I mean, what that's a beautiful benefit of comedians and finding the joy, because he needed more of that. I didn't go to comedy shows because it wasn't necessary.
You're already there. Yeah. But there's moments, of course, are always going to feel kind of frustrated sometimes, and you can't be happy joy all the time.
Right.
And so, like, I'd like to use the word radiance. Like, maybe what I'm radiating is frustration right now. I have frustration moments for sure. And yet it is a kind of a radiance, and I'm like fully in myself. And
yes,
maybe that's something to look for and to cultivate.
Well, if you're radiating frustration, and you actually can watch yourself radiating the frustration, have a bit of an observer.
Yep.
There's something interesting about that. Like, what's going on in me? So,
yes.
Totally. And my partner and I will do this thing where I'm feeling, the word is cranky.
Yep.
Like I'm feeling kind of cranky right now, and the other partner goes, "Okay, I'll see you later."
Right. Well, you're less likely to blame somebody else if you recognize it's coming from inside. You're like, okay, look out, not personal. I'm coming through.
And we know it. It doesn't last, right? It doesn't. Right. It's just a feeling flowing through.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Like a dream character, right? In the dreams and the ephemeral nature of dreams. Yeah.
Right. So bringing that awareness to the moment. Yes, I love that. I recognize that for sure.
Yeah.
So we're getting near the end of our hour, and I wonder, do you have any topics we haven't covered, or anything in particular that you want to share with our listeners now? Encouragements or suggestions or?
Okay, good question. Thank you for your good questions. I realized that when my partner said, "What's your main intention here?" and I said to her, "My main intention here is to somehow share the generosity of the universe, the generosity that comes if we pay attention." And you can call it the unknown, all kinds of different names. But dreams are such a doorway into the generosity of the universe. And even in nightmares, the nightmares are potentially pointing to places where something's hidden. We're kind of gently being poked, and if it's a nightmare, it's actually not a gentle poke; it's awful.
True.
So I understand that. But I've asked the universe to provide its lessons gently, and you can do that, and the universe will provide them gently. But if you don't get them, they're going to get a little bit more, and adamant,
Yeah.
and imperative. My sense is that it's all for our own development to be who we truly are, which is, I don't know. For each of us, it's a unique thing. And so I looked forward to writing in my journal and having dialogue with these inner characters, partially because I could tell that there was a gift. There was a gift here that I have not surfaced. There's something hidden in what's going on. And sometimes it comes through a phrase that they say, when you said this, what you were really saying was, and you go, oh, aha. And that's an insight. So it's an insight that can be given space. And then our wisdom comes from embodying those insights over time.
I love this. So Charles Tack, so good to have you on the show. Do you have a webpage or a phone number or email that you'd like to share with our listeners? You can also just have folks get in touch with me, and I can get in touch with you.
Email. CHASTACK@yahoo.com.
Okay. Great. Charles, this has been a wonderful conversation. I wish you all the best, and maybe we'll talk again sometime when your book's done, something like that.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. Good talking.
Okay. Take care, Charles. Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you for listening. The Dream Journal is produced at the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, and we are live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific at ksqd.org. You're welcome to join the conversation. The podcast is released on the Monday following the show. It keeps us growing when you subscribe, rate, and review. I am Catherine Bell. You can find out about my dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. Email me at catherine@ksqd.org, katherine@ksqd.org. You can follow Experiential Dreamwork and hashtag The Dream Journal on Facebook and Instagram to find out about upcoming shows. I'd like to thank Rick Kleffel, engineer and music creator, and Tony Russimano. Also, the intro music is Water Over Stones, and this beautiful background music you can find at pandemiad.com, thanks to Amy Barnes, his beautiful voice. The intro music, as I said, is Water Over Stones by Mood Science, and we're going to be hearing a new outro song in a moment called Resist. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, take a minute to write down your dream and bring it to the next Dream Journal.
Perfect is the enemy of good. The journey to perfect always starts with should. Should is a word that should not exist. If you want to use it, try hard to resist, to resist, to resist, resist, resist. Meet me in the middle, that's just tempting fate. You won't get what you want, won't negotiate. Meet me in the middle, that's just tempting fate. Fate, tempting fate, fate, fate. Tempting fate, tempting fate, fate, fate. Oh, it's a done deal. Sausage made, get something done deal. Hopes might fade, forget your done deals. It's in the past, a dumb and working deal. Gonna make it last.